Welcome to Song Sessions. I'm your host, David Pomeranz, and today we have with us someone whose work I admire very, very much, and I would use a word that gets bandied about, but I can use this word. It may embarrass him. It's called genius. This man is quite that man. He's written and recorded mega hits for himself as an artist, like Escape and Hymn and Terminal. He's produced and arranged albums and recordings for the likes of Barbra Streisand and Judy, and his songs have been featured both on television and in major films like A Star is Born. As a composer, lyricist, book writer, and arranger for musical theater, he has been nominated for 3 Tonys. He's won 2 Tonys. He's won the Drama Desk and Outer Circle Awards, and for a lifetime of brilliant work in all of these fields of music, he was awarded the ASCAP George M. Cohan Award for diversity and depth throughout his extraordinary career. He's an award-winning Broadway and television playwright, mystery novelist, short story writer, and I hear he plans to enter the Olympics next year in the breaststroke competition. Ladies and gentlemen, what a joy and an honor to present to you the wonderful Rupert Holmes. Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted the wonderful Rupert Holmes. He'll be right here.
Go
get him, okay? And by the way, the breaststroke has been canceled for the Olympics. It's the javelin for me. If anyone who knows me knows I am nothing if not Mr. Javelin. You know, so
right.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed you've been bulking up. I could see that you.
The word "me" and bulking up has never been associated in a sentence.
Oh, that's too funny. Hey, have you said, just before we get into the deep, fascinating stuff? Have you know the Bandwagon, right?
Oh, of course, one of my probably my favorite film musical. Yeah,
me too.
Yeah,
and
to me, when Fred Astaire and Jack Buchanan do, I guess I'll have to change my plan. Just the lightest soft shoe. It is absolute elegance, and Fred Astaire singing "I'll Go My Way by Myself." Oh my God!
Yeah,
no one knows better than I myself. Oh, breaks me up.
Alone. Me too. And those songs are incredibly written. It's Deep Schwartz. Anyway, I asked you because,
Schwartz.
Yeah, because it was on last night, and my wife and I have this thing. She goes, "I hate this musical. It's so boring."
Well, then,
I said, "Wait," and then I said, No, and I strapped her down into the sofa, and I said, "Watch."
Yeah, but you do that
musical.
every night, David. You do that every night. Stop it. You're not fooling us.
Well, it's something we like to do. We like to do around our house.
No, what's important here is, did she change her mind after seeing the movie?
Yes. Yeah,
it's a charming movie. And, from a plot point of view, from a whodunit point of view, but it's a fluff, absolute fluff. And I have to say, when they start going into drinking more beer, I Love Louisa, I could probably skip that section there, just because, German beer hall songs probably comes maybe 9th on my list of things, but everything else in that, and Dancing in the Dark, that number and the way it ends,
it's so elegant. They just step into the carriage. It's wonderful. I had a feeling you would love it because you're our mutual love.
Well, we have so many things in common, David.
We do.
We've both written a song called "Perfect Strangers." Mine for the Mystery of Edwin Drood,
right?
Duet for 2 sopranos. And you've obviously TV theme, right? Yes, that is yours, is it not?
Yeah, I didn't write Perfect Strangers, but I sang it. Sang it.
Sang it.
I sang it. But what we have most in common, my friend, is that we're Jewish, and that's the most important thing.
Well, now you see, this is where we stray. Here's the thing: you came out of Long Island. Yes.
Yeah.
No. I'm not going to disown anything here. Okay. No. Listen, I'm not trying to cop out on you. Believe me. I'm saying that we stray a little bit. Here's the thing. You came out of Long Island, yes?
Yes, sir.
You did. Okay, when I was born in England. I was born about 25 miles outside of Manchester. And when I was 5, my mother and father said to me, "We're going to go to a place called Long Island." And I thought, Long Island, pirates and palm trees. And then we moved to Levittown. Hook Lane in Levittown. Only stayed there a year. We both came out of there. And do I remember reading that you sang with your father in Temple? Was he a cantor?
Correct. That's right. He was not a cantor, but we both sang in the choir.
Okay, so here's the deal.
Yeah.
I was raised, and this is where I'm not. And by the way, both our names at one time were David, because my real name is not my real name. My real name is Rupert Holmes. That's my legal name. But my birth name was David Goldstein. But I was raised as an Episcopalian, and I was an altar boy.
Oh,
I was the only altar boy named Goldstein in all of Rockland County, New York.
Wow.
And they would say, assisting at today's baptism is David Goldstein. And I could hear them saying, they're getting in everywhere. They're getting it. They're infiltrating the church. So that is where when you say we're both Jewish, I am of Jewish descent, and I come from a long line of cantors, apparently, I'm told, on my father's side. Wow. But I didn't sing with my father in temple. I've never been bar mitzvah. So there we
diverge. Well, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I think the Jews, they go in there just to eat because they're hungry and they want the wafers. I think that's what it is.
The strain, yes.
Yes, it is. So, first of all, congratulations on this new thing that I was told about your receiving an honorary doctorate from Manhattan School of Music.
Yeah, it's as meaningful a thing that has happened to me. It just happened last week. They gave me an honorary doctorate. I even have the hood that you wear, that you add to your cap and gown. And it means so much to me, David. And here's the thing. I had to drop out of college because my career got in the way of it, of my education. I was 19 and arranging for the Drifters and the Platters and studying music at Manhattan School of Music. And in my junior year, I was Dean's List. I changed my major. I entered Manhattan School of Music as a clarinet major. That was my good instrument. I'm self-taught on piano, which means I had an ignorant amateur for a teacher. Something about when you say I'm self-taught, that means you had a stupid person teaching you. That's, So I entered as a clarinet major immediately. The second they accepted me, dropped clarinet. Good move. And switched to theory, music theory. And I was doing well. And then I got a job offer to go out to the West Coast and be an A&R person, meaning, supervising, writing, arranging, conducting, producing recording sessions for a new label in LA. Yeah. And I thought, well, that's what I'm studying in school to hope to do. And now they're offering me a chance to do it. So I'll have to leave school to do it, what I'm in school to do. Well, and so I never got a degree. No, I never got a degree. I taught myself arranging and all that. I'd never learned any of that, but to now get an honorary doctorate from them is so meaningful to me. Oh, it's like hometown boy makes good.
Well, no kidding. That's very serious business. I'm fascinated that you taught yourself. Look, you had a basis in theory, obviously.
Oh, sure.
You did attend that school. You did play the clarinet.
Yeah.
But your ability to orchestrate and arrange is so deep. I admire it so much that I'm surprised, but maybe not that surprised, knowing you a little bit. And how
can I tell you? Can I tell you why I never thought I would be an arranger. I thought I would be a songwriter.
Well, sure.
I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be a composer, and I didn't know how to get into theater for one thing. So what was left to me I had hair down to here, to my shoulders, and I could play a lot of instruments badly. I could play badly enough to make a whole demo by myself in the studio. So like yourself, I would do the drums and the bass, and then I'd do guitar and then piano. And they'd say, oh, and this kid will do all that for free. That's great. So that's how I started. But it never occurred to me that I would be an arranger. That seemed like, I don't know how people do that. I don't know how they make the choices they make. And then I started hearing arrangers, some of whom were name arrangers who I admired, and they did arrangements of my songs and they got them all wrong. I'd say, no, that's not what the key. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to learn to arrange. And the analogy I would make is that there are many screenwriters who become directors, and they don't become directors because they want to be directors. They become directors to protect their screenplay.
I understand.
They think the only way their screenplay is going to get filmed, the way they kind of envision it, is if they're also in charge of directing it. So I just thought and so I set myself to the task of learning how to arrange, and there were no pop courses for arranging except maybe at Berklee School of Music in Boston, but I wasn't going to Berklee. But I relied mainly on a book called Sounds and Scores by Henry Mancini, in which he did the incredible thing of showing you how he had written something, usually for TV, for the TV show Peter Gunn or Mr. Lucky. But then the book came with a couple of records, and it would contain the musical extract that he was showing you how it was voiced.
Oh, how
so you could I'd say, oh, so when if violins go that high, they're going up to. Oh, they're up to like an E or an F sharp and G sharp above the staff. Wow, I'd be scared to write, but it sounds pretty good there. So so I learned to arrange by doing that and by making tons of mistakes in the studio and covering for it. So I'd say, I think that'll sound good on a muted trumpet, but I'll cue it in the sax as well. And when it would sound bad with the muted trumpet, I'd say, play it on the sax.
Oh, I see. Well, at that level, is the arrangement, like say for a record date, is the arrangement and an orchestration, what would be the difference there? Someone's going to write this out, write all the parts out. Yeah. And as an arranger, as well.
I'm an arranger and I am an orchestrator. I'm both. And there are Broadway composers. By the way, there's nothing wrong with this, but there are Broadway composers who will say, rightfully, I arrange all my own stuff. And what they often mean is that they write a complicated piano part, and they may indicate they'll say counterline, and sometimes they'll say strings, STGS, strings, or bones, or sometimes they'll say brass cushions, or they'll say to somebody, I hear brass there. I guess it would be a conversation that McCartney might have had with George Martin. Or Lennon might have had with George Martin. Right. And they described abstract. But no, when I arranged, like when I did the Lazy, I not only wrote a lot of the Lazy Afternoon album by Barbra Streisand, but I arranged and conducted all of that album. And any note that you hear the orchestra playing is a pencil mark that I made. I did not know when I wrote The Mystery of Edwin Drood that Broadway composers never do their own orchestrations. So I did the orchestrations not knowing that was not expected of me. So it was a lot.
Well, we're going to talk about the Drood a little bit down the road because I want to really give it some full weight. But that's an extraordinary orchestration and arrangement feat, and you won a Tony for that. So
in those days, get this: the union rule was that if you had a Broadway musical at the Imperial Theater on 45th Street, that you had to hire 27 musicians for your orchestra.
Oh, yes,
and if you didn't want to use 27 musicians, you would still have to pay 27 musicians. So you might as well use 27 musicians. Those days are gone, and we will never see them again. Right. But when I did The Mystery of Edwin Drood, that was for 20, and that's not the biggest orchestra I've ever written for, but that was a big orchestra for Broadway. Even then. Broadway. Yeah. It was 5 woodwinds, 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, one of whom doubled on bass trombone, 2 French horns, a bunch of violins, bunch of cellos. I don't write for viola because there's nothing I write for viola I wouldn't write for cello. Percussion and drums, 3 keyboards, and all the 5 woodwinds doubling on like every woodwind you.
Man, oh man!
So it was the joy of all time. And when they revived the show on Broadway, I had to rewrite all the orchestrations because
why is that
now? Because it was a 13-piece orchestra now, and that I was lucky. I was lucky to get 13 pieces. John Kander of Chicago and Cabaret and New York. When we did the musical Curtains together, he only got, I think, 12 or 13 pieces. So I had to reorchestrate the entire show.
I see.
So
you got keyboards now. You got keyboards to fill in.
You got keyboards that are
strings
supposed to sound like those strings.
Yeah, and of course,
they don't. Yes.
Right. Well, look, going back into the Wayback Machine.
I'm way.
No. This is what. Hey, listen. So before we're going to go out into the Wayback Machine here.
Mr.
Peabody.
Peabody, yes.
Peabody and Sherman. We're going back to the Wayback Machine. And I was listening to a body of your work of these last few days and reminding myself of some of these things that you've done. And, we have that call it an era, that time where you were making those beautiful, beautiful albums, those evocative story albums, Widescreen and Partners in Crime and all these albums, which we're going to talk about. But I'm feeling things while I'm listening to this stuff, almost song for song, upbeat, downbeat, happy, sad, and I'm getting a feeling. What is this? And this morning I got it. It's Charlie Chaplin. Here's what I mean. So there's some sadness, there's some irony, there's some humor. It's Charlie Chaplin.
Well, first of all, you would know from Chaplin, my friend, number one.
Yes. But
your viewers should know that that's a remarkable creation of yours, and you still perform it as a solo piece, do you not?
I do. Thank you. I do.
That's incredible. Yeah. So there's that, number one. Thank you for the wonderful compliment. I suppose, life is, here's the thing. My thought early on was that life is full of tragedy, and tragedy is what we inherit as human beings. There's going to be tragedy in our lives, and humor is what we invented to cope with it. And that's maybe our greatest creation. The greatest thing we've done as a species is that we found ways to make jokes about things. And I often say that even though the dinosaurs thus far were a more successful species than we look like we might be, they certainly were around longer thus far than we have been. There is no paleontologist. I'm going to get into words I know. No paleontologist thank you very much, has ever advanced the theory that any dinosaurs ever did stand up.
Well, they might have had vaudeville.
It's funny. Yeah, I've always thought, Triceratops says, I think you'd find a Stegosaurus would go a little something like this. But
he turns around and comes back, and he's still got the nose.
So wonderful that he not only does a Stegosaurus, but he can make himself look like a Stegosaurus as well. So anyway, I don't know how you can sing about life and not find things that are humorous about it. And I don't know how you can sing about it and not find heartbreaking things about it too. So maybe in that regard.
Well, in that regard, but the irony is always so touching. Let's just jump to the Widescreen, which is your first epic album, and you've got things on there like Widescreen, like the title, and there's a line in there I really love. There are lines of yours that hit me, and I don't always expect it. And the chorus of Widescreen is widescreen. Again, widescreen, wind around my eyes, lie my mind with lies, find a world like nothing that I've seen. Widescreen dreams are just my size.
Yeah.
And it's the last line that kills me because it's about someone who's lonely and, spends their days watching movies and such. And it's not like life, but widescreen beams are just my size. And I am as big as those dreams. That's a beautiful way of turning that. Yeah. I just love that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah,
it's so true. My favorite yearning song of yours is Terminal, and I'm going to tell you a little story. I was in the Philippines. Place I
thought you might bring up the Philippines when you mentioned Terminal. You yourself are a giant in the Philippines, are you not?
Oh yes. I mean, I am a giant because they're smaller.
Stop it.
Their stature is small.
Stop it. Go ahead.
Castella, true. but here's the very quick story is I'm on. I may have told you this. I don't know. But I was in a taxi in Manila, and there was a guy who's driving, and I don't know what his status was in life. He was a little toothless, and and on comes your song Terminal, Da 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 da. And I'm thinking, wow. And he goes, in his broken English, he goes, Rupert Holmes. He goes, I love Rupert Holmes. I say, yeah. And he's listening to your song and he's driving like this. You know, and you never know where that's going to go, right?
I
Never know.
tell you, I have often said that for every songwriter, like people sometimes say, you know, do you wish that your most famous song was not Escape the PINA COLADA Song? And I say, well, yeah, of course, there's other songs that I hold in higher esteem, but I said, you know, every songwriter dreams of being in the back of a cab and you're talking with the cab driver. And he says, songwriting, huh? That's what you do? I said, yeah. Anything I know? And to be able to say, well, you know, you wrote that. I love that song. I love that.
He rolls down the window. Johnny, look who's back here.
And says, you know, Pina Colada. You know Pina Colada.
The Pina Colada guy.
It's got to right here. Sing some of it for him, will you? It's my friend Johnny. He gets me change when I need it. So yeah, that's a dream. I think I read, and probably this is very well known, but I think that Paul McCartney said that he knew that he had sort of made it when he heard the milkman delivering milk and humming his tune outside his window.
Yeah,
that's a great thing. Of course, later, because I'm a cynic, I think, yeah, the milkman knew that you're living there, and he was trying to sing this song, thinking, hey, that guy sings pretty good. I'll give him a record contract.
He wants a job.
Yeah, but no, it's things like that. I used to get excited when I had a song in the top 10, and someone would drive by in a convertible with the top down, and I would be coming out of their car as they drove away from me. In other words, I would hear me coming and going. I said, "That's me in your car." That's just wanted you to know that that's me in your car.
Yeah, it's lovely.
It's an amazing thing.
You connect.
Yeah.
Well, before any of that, you say you went to be an A&R person, and there was a period of time that I saw that you wrote a tune. You were in a band called the Cufflinks with Ron Dante, right? In
Ron
the late
Dante,
60s.
the great man who had who sang two top 10 records, 2 records in the top 10 in the same week, and no one on earth knew who he was. No one knew his name because he had number 4 or 6 with Tracy, and number 1 with Sugar by the Archies.
The Archies, yeah, he was the lead singer.
He was the lead. He was the studio singer who sang it. There was no there was no Cufflinks and there was no Archies.
Oh,
they
I see.
were just
I see.
Studio musicians, and I did most of the arrangements. And after Ron decided he wasn't going to be the vocalist of the Cufflinks anymore, I then became the vocalist of the Cufflinks as well.
Oh, I see.
And I got very well paid for that, David.
But it was
I may have made as much as $60 a song.
Oh my!
But I also had to do the arrangement too.
For the 60.
I had to play piano for the 60. Yeah.
All right.
And there was no mention of a thing called royalties. You know, it was like I had my $60 and I paid for dinner.
Those are good days in New York City. Not for that reason, but
no, not for that reason. But they were. I mean, it was people worked and worked and worked.
Well, yeah.
What'd you record mainly in New York? Were you out of like media?
Yeah, it was
sound
Decca. I was on Decca in New York.
Oh, you were on Decca. So you were in that Decca studio on 57th, was it?
Yes. Where they cut American Pie.
Palouse? Maybe an engineer named Don Palouse?
Oh, sure.
Or Don Palouse. Yeah. He was like their house engineer.
Right. And you know Shelley Yakis?
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He was Shelley Yakis. I love Shelley. But he was he was an assistant engineer at the time.
Yeah.
But so there you are in New York at that really storied time for all of us. And you're doing jingles. I'm fascinated with this culture because, you know, in this show, we interviewed Richard Marx and Melissa Manchester and Barry Manilow and Jim Brickman, and they all say the same thing. Jingles started with jingles. And what, aside from the orchestrating and the arranging, what was your takeaway writing jingles? Did it benefit you? Was it the tightness of it? What was that like for you?
Well, you know, I probably would. Okay, so let me see if I can give you a sensible answer to that. I would say that the one jingles, I don't know that everyone will understand this, but jingles made it acceptable to have missing beats in bars because you had to get, like, what if you, okay, so the idea of going like, when you arranged for a jingle, everything sounded like a Bacharach tune because you kept going in and out of strange time signatures because you had to squeeze all of the jingle. So in other words, a typical commercial would go, "Oh, fab, I'm glad they put new borax in you." But then they'd say, you know, we've got lemon freshen borax now. So you'd have to do, "Oh, fab, I'm glad they put new lemon freshen borax in you." So you'd completely lost any sense of the beat. "Oh, fab, I'm glad they put new lemon freshen borax." Where's one? Where's the downbeat? Where's the downbeat? So you learned, especially a lot of the jingles that I did were underscore for, they were not jingles as such, but musical underscore. And you had to learn you had to do all kinds of, you were always using bars of, you know, 5/4 because you needed one extra beat. And then, so that kind of juggling. The thing I didn't like about jingles was that it got to be where musicians and singers coming into your recording session for your album were disappointed not to see the words Coca-Cola 60-second at the top of the sheet, because they would make much more money from that.
Oh, I see.
Because what would happen is someone like Melissa Manchester, very busy studio singer, would come in and they'd book them for 90 minutes and they'd sing a Pepsi commercial. And they'd never think about it again. They get paid a decent amount of money,
right?
But they never think about it again. And then somehow 6 months later, they get a residual check for all the Pepsi commercials that aired that they sang on, and it was pretty lucrative. And the musicians had the same thing. And so there was a period in New York where all the session people would come in to do my album, which is not a jingle; it's pop, and they'd go, "Hi, how you doing? Oh, this is this is for a record? Oh, okay.
Oh, we're not going to see the big check."
And I had an interesting history with our mutual friend, Barry Manilow, because we were both up for the same American Airlines commercial. And he wrote one that I knew would lose because it started above the high and jagged mountains. And I thought, no airline wants to remind you that you would be flying over high and jagged mountains.
Dude, dangerous.
Just not really a good word. And the chorus was a descending, like, "We're American Airlines, American Airlines."
Going down.
Down. And I wrote a song that went, "We're American Airlines, doing what we do best. Fly American, we'll take care of the rest. We're American Airlines." Well, okay.
Go ahead.
And I did not get the final commercial. They used those words, but I didn't get the final jingle. But I always liked the chorus, the theme that I had written.
Yeah.
So I turned it into a song called "Studio Musician." That went, "I'm a working musician, pulling my 5 awake. I'm the voice through which empty men." And Barry heard it, and I don't know if subconsciously Barry remembered that I was his competitor, and that was the theme from the American Airlines commercial that we were both up for. But he then recorded the song. He's done it twice on 2 live albums. And because it speaks to that frustration of being a session person doing jingles and wondering, will I ever sing a song that is not about putting lemon freshened borax in fab, but rather about putting some hope in my heart. And I don't know how much of our dual submissions on that commercial affected him recording it, but I've never talked to him directly about it. Maybe I don't know. Do you talk to him much? He's certainly done
not much. I mean, we just did our interview, but no, I haven't talked to him much. But he
well, would you bring it back for another interview and ask him that question, please?
Yes, we'll bring.
I'm sure he's just down the hall anyway.
Well, it's a great song. A studio musician, everybody. I'm going to kind of break away here and talk right into that camera. So this is a great song, and as Rupert is saying, it's really about it's the woodwind player or the flute player or the string player who is hired for a date for a recording session date and gets paid and goes home, and it's their whole life. And these people, they're some of the greatest musicians in the world. These people, and
we don't know you don't know the people you don't know who have done the wallpapered your life with music. There's a fellow named Sal de Troya, an acoustic guitar player, and he played a riff on Harry Nilsson's recording "Everybody's Talking." It went dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba dum.
Yeah. That's him. That's his invention.
That's him. And then he did the commercial. They did a BP oil commercial, and they said, "We want you to kind of do like do you know Harry Nilsson's Everybody's Talking?" And he said, "You mean this?" And he played dun 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 dun. They said, "Yeah, can you do that on the BP commercial?" He said, "Yeah, I guess I can." Dun, 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 dun. And he was such a part of a period of our lives, and you'll never know his name. The lyric goes, "I am a studio." No, I'm not going to do the whole thing. Don't worry. No. But it's the part that means most to me is the opening. Is "I am a studio musician. We've never met, but you know me well. I am the English horn who played the poignant counterline upon the song you heard while making love in some hotel. I am a part of you. I've never tried for fame. You'll never know my name." So out of those jingle sessions, I got enough to put Burger King on my table, and I got enough to get a lot of experience arranging for lots of different instrumentations and working with some great session singers and knowing who they were when I needed them for my albums. But I also got despair at the thought that maybe this would be my fate, that I would never get to actually make a record, record something that was something I could stand on, that I could say to my son or daughter, when I was your age, this is what I was about.
Well, I understand. Thank you for saying that. When you were doing all this, you were writing, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
At nights, right?
Yeah.
And you had this, I will say this parenthetically, although it wasn't for you, I'm sure at the time, you wrote this tune, Jennifer Tompkins. And I remember it. I swear it ain't fair, trouble, trouble everywhere. And that was you.
That song began that song was key to my being thought. It sort of paved the way for people being able to think that I was a guy who might actually be able to vocalize. And it involves Ron Dante, and a fist fight that he had with the songwriter of Tracy by the couplings. So in my early years, I wrote with an established songwriter named Paul Vance. And Paul, the good side of it is he wrote songs like Catch a Falling Star and Put It in Your Pocket by Perry Como.
Love that.
And he wrote, trying to think, I think he wrote What Is Love, 5 Feet, What Is Love, 5 Feet of Heaven in a Ponytail for Brian. I think he wrote that. He also wrote Leader of the Laundromat by the Detergents, which was a parody of Leader of the Pack. And Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. So he wrote all those songs and he needed someone basically, he couldn't read music, couldn't write music, couldn't play piano. He liked to stand by a piano and make up the tunes. And he needed somebody who was willing to sit at the piano and figure out what chords might fit what he was singing and notate it all and then later arrange it. and then conduct the session. And so I was doing that. How did I get to this? So he decided one day that he said to me, he's about 20 years older than I was. And he said to me, bubblegum music is the new thing. That's the thing. We're going to write a song. I got a great idea. I don't know how I got it. Bubblegum has come to town. We're going to do that song. So I'm sitting there and I'm playing, and the chorus goes, hop, skip, jump around, bubblegum has come to town. Look everywhere. That's okay. So we go into the studio at Groove Sound on 55th Street, a little 8-track studio attached to Music Core Records, not one of your big labels. And we record this record, and the lead singer is, as always for Paul, Ron Dante, the aforementioned Ron Dante. And he records the song, Bubblegum Has Come to Town. He sells it to Music Core Records. 2 weeks later, he says, I just got a hysterical call from the head of Music Core Records. So what is, he said, they say bubblegum is the kiss of death. That word is the kiss of death. Kids like bubblegum music, but they don't want to say they're listening to bubblegum music. They want the bubblegum feel. They don't want to reference it as bubblegum. That's death. We've got to change the lyric to the song. Got to write a whole new lyric to the existing track.
Right. Wow.
So at that point, we make up this song. Paul was always loved writing about poor white trash. Loved writing about poor white trash. And we make up this song about, and in most of Paul's songs, the girls got pregnant. And this was just a thing. And we make up this song called Jennifer Tompkins. And it's, and we go to have Ron Dante come in to sing the new lyric. Ron Dante does not show for the session. Turns out that Don Kirshner has said, you've got the #1 record with Archie's, Sugar Sugar. I'm going to create an Archie's. You're going to be Archie. You're going to go out there as Archie. Now, I don't want you doing any more of these records where you're the cufflinks or this group or that group. You're going to be the lead singer of the Archies. So Ron refused to show up for the session. We're in the studio. And I know the song because I'm the guy that sat at the piano and worked it out. So I go, he says, you sing it. So I go in on mic. I had a little bit of bronchitis that day. I was wheezing a little bit. And I said, well, this is a bubblegum record, even though we're not saying it's bubblegum. So I got to sound like I'm about 16. And I'm singing, Jennifer Tompkins was born on a Sunday. Her daddy got drunk and left home on a Monday. Her mother, she died. Like that. Hop. And instead of singing hop, skip, jump around, I'm singing, oh, Lord, just ain't fair. Trouble, trouble everywhere. Oh, Lord, come on down. My theory is that the record charted because it was only 1 minute and 58 seconds long with a 30-second fade. So if a DJ looked at his clock and saw that he had 2 minutes before he had to go to the news, he could play Jennifer Tompkins and still have time to say, okay, that's Jennifer Tompkins. We're going to go a little bit of news now. We'll be right back with a new record by the Beatles.
Wow.
So I think it just fit in that slot. But what happened was it did chart in Billboard. Yeah. And suddenly I was credible as a person doing lead vocals on records.
Incredible. And was that your first
that was the first
writing?
Commercial record
where you sang?
That was the first commercial record where I sang that went top 40.
Okay.
The first song that I ever wrote that went top 40 was it was in a genre of songwriting that almost every songwriter has written at least 1 or 2 songs about this topic. It was about cannibalism during a mining disaster.
I know that song. Wait a minute. It's called Timothy.
It's called Timothy.
I know Timothy.
And Timothy is, Timothy, I'm very proud that I wrote a song about cannibalism during a mining disaster. I do not actually, I have never advocated cannibalism as a lifestyle.
Right.
And I don't think anyone ever switched to cannibalism.
Right.
No vegans ever heard the song Timothy and said, oh no, I've been going the wrong way. I've been going. So here's the deal. Here's what, I mean, if you were trying to make a name for yourself and no one knew who you were, then you will relate to this, which is I had during this period where I was working for $30 a song to play every instrument and make the demo and make the record and all like that. I became friends with a junior engineer at Scepter Recording Studios on 54th. It's actually on the 4th floor of where 54 Below was, where my Broadway musical, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, ended up being revived at 54 studio. What was Studio 54?
Yep.
So I worked on the 4th floor at Scepter Records, and this engineer came to me and said, "I work in the studio. I have a group, and they've let me make 2 singles with the group. And it's just really, I think they're doing it as a kindness to me, as a courtesy. I don't think they even know the group is on the label. They put out 1 record, and now I'm down to 1 45 single that I get to make with them. And I don't know what to do because no one's paying any attention to it." I said, "Well, if I were you, I would record a song that gets banned." And he said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." I said, "Oh, sure it does." I said, "Look, you understand, I'm like 19 years old here, so I have all the wisdom and I was an immature 19-year-old. So you're talking about some of the wisdom of a 16-year-old. I said, look, here's the logic. I said, if it gets banned, you can go to other record labels and say, this record would have been a hit if it wasn't banned. This is that group that everyone's talking about." He said, "Will you write me a song that will get banned?" Well, if someone said to me, in those days, if someone said, "Will you write me a song about Esquire Scuffcoat?" I would say, "You bet. That's a favorite topic of mine." So I said, "How do I write a song that gets banned, but it's got to get played enough that it can get banned?" In other words, if it's just bad,
it's got to get.
If I write a song that's a
backlash,
right? It's got to be something that gets out there, and then suddenly there's controversy. So I can't write a song that is a string of 4-letter words. That's just not allowed by the FCC in that time. Okay, I can't write a song that's about drugs, versions, so it's a very limited amount of things that you can write that can sort of be played and sort of get banned. I was working on an arrangement for Jeff Barry of 16 tons for an artist named Andy Kim. And
sure.
I was strumming in my apartment, and I had a pretty good feel for 16 tons. And I'm going, "Some people say a man is made out of mud," like that. So meanwhile, while I'm doing that, in the kitchen, the TV is on, and there's a cooking show called The Galloping Gourmet with Graham Kerr.
Yeah.
And he was kind of a Liberace of cooking shows,
Yes, very.
And I had just seen the movie Suddenly Last Summer a week earlier on TV, which seems to have an element of cannibalism. So now Graham Kerr's in the other room. I've got on my mind that I got to think of a song that can ban. And I'm singing 16 tons to a kind of Creedence Clearwater guitar feel. And I'm going, "Some people say a man is made out of mud. A coal man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood." I said, it sounds like a recipe. "Muscle and blood and skin and bones, bake in a moderate oven for 3 hours, topped with Miracle Whip." And I thought, cannibalism during a mining disaster. I won't say it. I'll just imply it. Hungry as hell, no food to eat. And Joe said that he would sell his soul for just 1 piece of meat. Water and Timothy, Joe was looking at you. Timothy, God, what did we do? So the record got released, and it went up 2 increments in Billboard every week. It would go from 98 to 96. It would go from 87 to 85. It would be at 66 with an anchor, not with a bullet. It would go. And it gradually crept up the charts. The label, Scepter Records, didn't even know it was. What was happening was what are called tertiary stations, the little tiny small stations.
Small ones. Yep.
They would play the record, and the kids would like it and respond to it. And then a DJ would listen to the record and suddenly say, "Wait a second, hold on. Is this what I think it's about? We can't play this. They ate him. They ate the guy. We can't." They'd pull it off the air, and kids would say, "Why aren't you playing Timothy anymore?" And they say, "That's disgusting. You shouldn't listen to a song like that." No, well, that's all you have to tell a kid. is that he shouldn't listen to it. And it went all the way up to 17 on the charts in Billboard, 17 over the course of about 6 months. And in the end, the only thing that stopped it from going top 10 was that certain big monster stations like ABC AM in New York would absolutely just have nothing to do with the record. And usually if people say, I knew Timothy growing up, I'd say, what part of the country did you grow up in? Florida, Georgia? Was that because if you were a New Yorker, it was very hard to hear that song. But I'm kind of proud. That was my first chart record because it was about a kid, me, wanting to get into the business and find some way through the transom that I created a situation and a song that would artificially be truly the tail wagging the dog.
Well, today it would go viral. Certainly.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we didn't have those
viral
mediums. Yeah, I had to go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so although people say, "Aren't you ashamed of that?" I always say, I kind of am proud of that kid that I was.
Yeah.
Who said, I've got to find a way to get somebody to notice that I'm a songwriter.
I understand. It's you kept doing that, whether you know it or not. I mean, I'm going to make a comment on it, but and you did it with quality. Okay, I mean, you actually did it when nobody or very few of anybody who wasn't in the theater was writing for a situation and a character with perfect rhymes and things that, inner rhymes and just quality. And that became, I'm not saying you planned it that way, but as a listener and a fan of yours, that became the thing that you did that was different from anyone else. That became the thing that was your calling card. It's a Rupert Holmes song, and no one else was doing that.
Well, I was always drawn, David, to plot-driven songs, and I liked elegant plot-driven songs. There were plenty of plot-driven songs in country music, that had a kind of folk tinge to them, Tom Dooley, things like that.
Sure.
But I remember, I was just thinking about it, and I wish I had the lyric here in front of me today. Maybe when I was in 6th grade, I was sick with a cold, just nothing bad, but I was home from school. And that meant I got to have the radio by my bed and listen to radio shows. And at that time, there were still a couple of radio programs on. It wasn't all just Top 40 radio. Mm-hmm. So Arthur Godfrey had a morning show. He was unctuous and unbearable, but he always had guest singers, and they would sing current pop songs. And someone came on and sang a song, which the title of which is, I assume it's Guess Who I Saw Today. Guess who I saw today, my love? And I'm going to paraphrase you because I don't have the lyric in front of me, and I apologize to the songwriter. And it was actually from an off-Broadway review. I didn't know it at the time, called New Faces of 1952, I think. Mm-hmm. That introduced Paul Lynde to an audience.
Alice Ghostley, sure.
Yeah, Alice Ghostley, you're right. And the plot of it was, guess who oh, hi, dear, you're late from the office. Yeah, you want a drink? Yeah, I've had a pretty busy day myself. Yeah. Guess who I saw today, my love? I saw a couple that were just so in love. They were in a cafe and they were just staring at each other. And I thought, well, that's how we used to stare at each other when we first fell in love. And it was so beautiful. Guess who I saw today, my love? I saw you. Meaning, and I sat in bed and thought, that was just a movie with a trick ending. And it was handsome and elegant. And I never saw the ending coming. And it left me, I started to love songs that left me different when they were over than how I was when they began. I love songs. It's kind of like, I like to drink very hot beverages and very cold beverages. And I have no interest in anything in between because I want that beverage to do something to me. Mm-hmm. And I love it when a song starts and maybe the title intrigues me. Maybe the first line intrigues me. And when it's done, I'm not the same place. I'm not in the same location emotionally. And maybe I'm not even the same person. Certainly I'm not, I've said this to you all your life, not that we get to see each other more than once every God knows how long, but I tried to get Barbra Streisand to record Trying to Get the Feeling Again, I believe, before Barry did. And I heard it I think I heard your demo of it or your recording of it. And from the first sentence of it, I thought, well, I'm not going anywhere for 3 minutes. I have to find out what this song is about and what happens to this person. Mm. And I just always fell in love with situational songs, either character studies or songs that had a form of plot. I grew up respecting rhymes, and I know how hard it is to rhyme. So I tried most of my career to really write meticulous. I had to cheat once or twice.
Sure, me too. I understand.
But sometimes there's a line and you just have to say it, and but I don't think that house and love rhyme.
Right.
So I do try to, and I delighted in inner rhymes as well. So I try to, those are kind of like a little private reward to myself. So it seemed like once I had the chance to record my first album, Widescreen, and I knew that I was the only person who was going to decide what the songs were going to be about, that I was going to make sure that every song was its own miniature movie, told its own narrative, had its own, it was not 10 pages from my diary. I always find it hilarious when people think I am the guy in the Pina Colada song. I'll see someone saying, I don't care what Rupert Holmes and his wife are up to. I don't say what what a terrible person. I always want to say, I'm not that. That's a character in a song. Right. And nowadays people think it's, I'm not putting her down in any way whatsoever, but it's a kind of a Taylor Swift syndrome, which is that every page must be about her from your personal life, or it's not real. It's not authentic. Yeah. And I always say, well, did you ever hear of fiction? And were you aware that Agatha Christie is not actually a mass murderer? We pretend to be people. So when I made that first album, I actually was dubious as to whether I would ever get a chance to make a second album. So I put everything I had into it. I wrote the song Terminal, and that turned a lot of things. That song is what got me the deal to make the album. Because they wanted me to make, Epic wanted me to make 4 bubblegum singles along the lines of what I'd done for myself and for Ron Dante. And when I went to do the session with the pop bubblegum singles, I said to myself, you've got to make a record you care about. As I was saying earlier, this might be your only chance. You're the producer of this session. This is not for Paul Vance. This is not for $30. This is for you. And it was, by the way, the artist was not going to be Rupert Holmes. It was going to be a group called Rosebud.
Oh, no kidding.
Really?
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, I've got this song Terminal, and it tells a narrative, and it's certainly not a bubblegum record, and it's not by a group. It's one person singing this song, and it's a confession, and it's about someone who had a chance at happiness and squandered it.
Right.
And I made the record, and I thought I might have my head handed to me. I thought Epic might say, this is not what we paid you for. We want our money back. This is not a bubblegum group vocal. And instead they called me and said, we want to put this out as Rupert Holmes. And I said, well, yeah, okay, that's great. But I don't want to put out a 45 as Rupert Holmes, because if it's not a hit, that's going to be it. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, what do you want? I said, I want an album deal. I want to make an album for you as Rupert Holmes. And they said, no. We're not prepared to do that.
Oh my gosh.
And for about a week went by, and I thought, wow. And then they called after a week and said, we thought about it. Yeah, you can make an album. They gave me $40,000 to make the album, and I spent $42,000 on the album with Jeffrey Lester, my producer. Yeah. Meaning I didn't pocket a penny. I was doing better with Paul Vance, making the $30 a song. But I made sure that every song on that album told a story and was different from the song before it and the song after it. And even the instrumentation on every cut is different. So the second cut has the Glenn Miller Orchestra as my backup band.
Well,
the third.
Truly? That's who it was? Yeah.
Well, no, not.
It's that kind of.
I wrote it for 5 saxophones, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, rhythms.
Right. See, that's another great song. I'm glad you brought it up. It's called Second Saxophone, and Second Saxophone is about a guy who is in a band like Glenn Miller or something, and he's not the lead. He's not the guy who blows the lead. He's the guy who supports in the band, and he never gets his shot. And I'm actually wary to even say how the song turns out, like a movie. Like you would not say, shh, don't say how the.
Yeah, I won't put. But
no, you can. You can.
Oh, I can. I'm allowed to.
Of course. Well, no, I'm just saying I wouldn't want to because it affects me that way. I mean,
yeah. I'll be glad to. So it's about a fellow who never gets to take a solo, and finally, and what I tried to do is in the arrangement, I tried to paraphrase about 12 major big band themes of the 40s. I coming as close as I could without actually plagiarizing, so it would evoke them without actually being them. So that's my background track. So for one cut on the album, no other cut on the album, we go back to a 1940 sound. And I'm the lead singer, and I'm saying, now I'm finally going to take my solo. And I start to take my solo, and I'm playing an alto sax, and I'm really playing that solo on the record. And as I'm playing the alto sax, the band starts to crossfade with the sound of 57th and 8th Avenue and the traffic of a city street and the sidewalk. And what I'm playing, the solo starts to transition into Carnival of Venice. And you hear someone throw a quarter into a cup. And I go, thank you very much. Because of course he's taking a solo, and where he ends up is on the street playing for quarters.
Beautiful.
So it was, but that was an attempt to make to tell a story, a narrative, using music as cinematography, using the arrangement as such, and using whatever it took, including dialogue, sound effects, to help support a twist ending that you wouldn't have expected. And in a way it worked, because people would say, a record exec would say, you got to listen to the ending of this record. This is amazing. And they would play it. So it really did help. And the record was it was a critical success. It was not a commercial success, but one copy found its way into the hands of Barbra Streisand, who said that what she found, one of the things that she liked most about it was that every cut was different. Every cut told its own story. It wasn't all just one sound, the whole album. And the next thing you know, I was out there working with her.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that one must have been quite extraordinary. Before we leave widescreen and go to talk about Barbra, there's a piece on widescreen. It's called Psychodrama, and I remember hearing it on the radio. By the way, that's where I first heard it. I didn't hear it on the album. Yeah. They're playing it on the radio, and basically what that is, I don't know how long it is. A 10-minute radio. It's a radio play.
It's a radio show.
And are there all those voices yours, by the way?
We hired first of all, the heroine was the Nightbird, Alison Steele.
Oh, sure.
Who had the closest thing I could think of to that sultry Lauren Bacall type voice.
Yes.
She came into the studio and did that. And I got Will Jordan, the impressionist, who always was famous for doing Ed Sullivan. He did the voices of James Mason, and he also did the voice of Peter Lorre.
Oh my gosh.
But I played myself, and what a smart idea, and smart is in quotes, what a smart idea for a singer-songwriter on his first album to waste 10 minutes of the album on a radio show that has no song in it. I did write, it had underscore, a lot of underscore, and I wrote
that. You arranged all that, sure.
Yeah.
But I like when the guy, go ahead, what do you think?
No, you go.
The guy falls out of a window in the thing, and you're the narrator guy, and it says, he falls out the window. He says, "I wound up on a foam rubber trolley car," blah, 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 and he goes on. It's so funny and smart. So there you go, and in 1974, whatever that was, and precursing what you later did with, certainly on Broadway. But then you did the Remember When series for American Movie Classics. that was about the radio era and the people that make radio shows and such.
Well, go ahead.
No, I'm just fascinated that and wondering, is how much of a fan of that genre were you in terms of
well, here's the
style
thing.
radio?
Here's the thing. I was not around. I was not alive for the golden age of radio.
Yeah.
I was born in 1947. And by the 1950s, radio was being pushed away. The networks all wanted to have everything on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And one by one, all the great radio shows died. By the time I was I'm never smart enough, but by the time I was old enough to process a half-hour plot of a show like Suspense or a mystery on the radio, almost all the shows were gone. There was the last CBS radio show was broadcast in 1960, when I would have been 12 into 13. But the few radio shows I heard at that age were like heroin to me, because I would sit in the dark and great actors would inhabit these people, but I decided what they looked like. And I decided what the room looked like. I was the cinematographer. And if there was a girl in a detective story and she sounded sexy, she would be what I thought of as sexy.
Sure.
And it was magic, because the listener collaborated with the talent that created the show. I've said all my life, I thought, I'm envisioning something. And if my friend is sitting next to me listening to the same radio show, the imagery he's got is probably different from mine, some basic similarities.
It's like reading a book, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. So I always say that when I say in the Pina Colada Song, even something as silly and lighthearted as that, when I say we're going to meet at a bar called O'Malley's where we'll plan our escape, everyone has their own idea of what a bar called O'Malley's looks like. And the second you start picturing something in a song of mine, I've sort of got you, because now it's your song as well. Mm-hmm. And you are collaborating with me. And I always thought, first of all, I was very lucky there were no music videos when I was a singer-songwriter, because they would have said, well, he's not photogenic. We're not going to be able to do anything with him. This was that wonderful era where you could just go on what the words and the music were and your voice sounded like, and how sincere you were. Mm-hmm. And when music videos came in, which was after I peaked as a recording artist, I thought, number one, I never would have lasted anyway, but also I thought, what a shame. When Madonna sings Material Girl, I'm stuck with one image, and it's that gentlemen prefer blondes, red satin dress on the steps being. If I listen to Sledgehammer, I have to envision the music video I am given. And it's like, don't bother to make up anything. We'll tell you what the imagery is.
Interesting.
And then you're stuck with that image. And nowadays, when you get nostalgic for songs from the early MTV era, you get nostalgic not only for the tune and the vocal and the lyric, but you get nostalgic for the video, that grainy, crummy video that they did on a shoestring budget. But you get, but I was always intoxicated by the fact that in its limitation, radio sucked you in and forced you to become more involved in the story. And I loved that about story songs, where I would get to envision the entire story would be in my imagination. And I just always wanted to continue doing that. And when AMC, the American Movie Classics, said, do you have a take on radio? I said, it was such a great time, because you could have a little radio station in Pittsburgh, and they could be all things to all people. It's the most unbounded stage in creation. Sure. Because no actress ever grows too old for a role on the radio. Mm-hmm. The soap opera actresses who played the leads, they could do the lead for 30. They could be playing a young 21-year-old girl new to New York City. They could play that role till they were 65 and get away with it.
Sure.
So yes, I was always fascinated by radio and applying radio techniques to the records that I made.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, that's made them singular, very unique. And I'm sure that the Epic guys, when they were first expecting you to turn something in, what did they say? Give me the guy that wrote Timothy. I want another Timothy. Can you get the cannibal guy here?
They didn't want the cannibal guy, but they did want. They sort of wanted the person who did things that sounded like the cufflinks and stuff like that.
Yes, of course. Anyway, so moving along, you've done some wonderful songs, and I'm going to just skip through a few on widescreen. First of all, we have a thing called Letters That Cross in the Mail, which is very sad and ironic and interesting. But then, as you said, Barbra Streisand calls. Actually, did she call your home and say, Rupert?
David? Yes, she did. David. She actually, I mean, I'm sitting in an apartment and the phone rings and she was on Columbia Records. I was on Epic, their sister labels. Mm-hmm. So she was able to get my phone number very easily. And a voice says, "Hi, this is Barbra Streisand. Listen, I really like this album of yours and I want to record some of the songs on it, and I see you do all the arrangements yourself. So probably it would be a good idea if you came out here and did the sessions with me. And I'm working on a movie called A Star Is Born. You might want to write some songs for that too." And I think I said, that is the worst Barbra Streisand impression I've ever heard in my life. She doesn't sound like that at all. And she said, "No, it's really me. It's really me." I said, "Okay, Barbara." Sure. And I figured there are a whole bunch of people that there's a woman on the phone and then all my friends are around her going like, he's buying it. When I got a first class airplane ticket to LA and was told I would be staying at the Bel Air Hotel, I began to think it might be either a very expensive practical joke that I would play along with because the Bel Air Hotel is very, very nice. Mm-hmm. Or maybe this was really happening to me.
Mm-hmm. And your first moment with her face to face, what was that like?
I do not drive. It is one of my idiosyncrasies. I never learned to drive. It is not that I had my license revoked. I never had one. Consequently, I always have to have a driver. So when I went out to LA, Barbra had to pick me up. Mm-hmm. She pulls up in a Mercedes that must have been about 8 minutes old. The leather was still so rich and gorgeous smelling. Mm. And she says to me, "Hi, how are you?" And she said, "Sorry, I'm late." And I said, "Oh, fuck that." And I thought, my first words to Barbra in person are fuck that, right? And she says, "I've got to go see a screening of Funny Lady, rough cut. Got to go see a rough cut of Funny Lady over at the Fox Studios. Do you mind coming with me and watching with me? And then we'll go out. We'll go to my place in Malibu and we'll go through the songs."
Oh, my.
So I said, well, and by the way, I did not say, "Oh, I don't know, Barbra. I don't know that I can go." Yeah, of course. So now, even though—
I'm sure you didn't, pardon me, I'm sure you didn't sleep that night. Probably, right?
Can you imagine?
So you didn't sleep. You took a plane. She says, "Let's go to the movie. Let's go. And then we're going to get to work." Now, are you running on coffee? What are you doing here?
Coffee, yes. And here's the deal. Even though I don't think Funny Lady was I think that was a Columbia picture, but I think the producer had an office on the 20th Century Fox lot, and the screening of the rough cut, the first assembly of the film, for those who don't know what rough cut is. This is very raw footage. The first assembly is at Fox. So she drives onto the Fox lot, and we drive underneath the New York elevated subway set, exterior set for Hello, Dolly.
Whoa.
So I said, okay, so let's take inventory here. Mm. I'm being chauffeured by Barbra Streisand, who is driving me under the set of Hello, Dolly to go see a rough cut of her new sequel to Funny Girl. And then we're going to go to Malibu where she's going to rehearse my songs with me.
And what happened when you woke up?
I thought, if this is a dream, the person who wakes me from it is a dead person. Let me just, if this is a dream, I want to die in my sleep. Let's just, yeah. And then the most incredible experience was she puts on the album because she knows she's going to sing. She's already told me she wants to sing a couple of the songs on the album, on my album.
Yep.
And also wants me to write a couple of things for her. And she lip syncs to my song without the lyric in front of her.
Oh my.
You know,
Cool.
David? Yeah. So she had listened to these songs a couple of times. And by the way, when she sings it, she doesn't sound like Rupert Holmes. She sounds like Barbra Streisand. And I'm sure you've had this feeling where someone whose voice you've known all your life is singing one of your songs, and maybe they're working with you, and they open their mouth and sing. And for me, it's like Barbara would start to sing a song I'd written, and she'd go, and I go, and she'd say, what's so funny? I said, well, it's Barbra Streisand's now singing that song. You know, when I wrote it, it was like, no. But now it's being said. It would be like Cary Grant picking up your script and saying, oh, I think that I want. You'd say, oh, you sound just like Cary Grant. Oh, you are Cary Grant. Okay, that's great.
You're not Frank Gorshin, you're Cary Grant.
Yeah.
Well, that's extraordinary. I'm going to say a very quick story. Frank Capra, one of my favorites. I'm sure you too.
Absolutely.
Favorite film director. And I bought myself a print of It's a Wonderful Life. And it was a 16 millimeter print, but a really nice one. And we'd go to the American Film Institute one Christmas and invite 100 friends, rent the screening room, invite 100 friends, show them the movie. And I had done this with a director friend of mine called Dick Michaels, really good director. Anyway, he knew Capra kind of, and we had invited him to be at the screening. And he begged off because his wife was ill. And so we showed the movie, It's a Wonderful Life. It's pretty wonderful. And everybody's just, hugging and crying and kissing. And the very next morning, on my friend Dick's answering machine was Capra's voice. And he says, "This is Frank Capra about the screening last night. How did they was it okay? Did they like it?"
I mean,
It's a Wonderful Life.
I assume you have the cassette in your answering
I'm sure he
machine.
does. It was not my machine, it was his, and I'm sure he's got it. I've got a signed copy of something from, but anyway, but you get that feeling for the greats that that they're in the zone of their work. That's why they do what they're doing.
I had that. I wrote a musical with Marvin Hamlish of the movie The Nutty Professor. We've had some legal problems with it because the rights got screwed up. But it was scheduled to be at a major summer music theater this summer, but of course COVID changed all that. Hopefully next summer. But Jerry Lewis is like my hero from Martin and Lewis, like age 5, and to get a call from him on my it's I had to audition. Marvin and I were asked to write 2 songs from this musical that was projected that someone wanted to create of Jerry's movie.
Right. This is for everybody. This is Marvin Hamlish. He's talking.
Marvin Hamlish, the legendary Marvin Hamlish, the great Marvin Hamlish. The Mensch was also a genius. Yeah. And whose piano bench is on the other side of this laptop computer. It's something that his widow gave me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And writing with him the last 3 years of his life was one of great joy and privileges for me. But anyway, so the deal is we should write 2 songs speculatively for the musical of The Nutty Professor, and we would sing them for Jerry. And then if he liked those, he would give the go ahead for us to write the entire musical. So there comes a day where I'm standing across from Jerry Lewis, literally 4 feet from Jerry Lewis, who was the true, before there were the Beatles, the coolest guys on the planet were Martin and Lewis. They were the coolest guys to be. And the first thing that happens is Marvin's at the piano, Marvin Hamlish, and he plays an intro. And the first thing that I think is, gee, when you write with Marvin Hamlish, you get a really good accompanist in the bargain. He's playing like a really good.
He was Barbara's accompanist, no?
Oh, absolutely,
time?
Barbara.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Liza Minnelli. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, truly are. And now I suddenly say, oh my God, I've written this song in the character that Jerry Lewis created, Julius Kelp, the Nutty Professor.
Right.
And I'm now going to have to sing for Jerry Lewis, who created this character, and I'm going to have to do Jerry Lewis for Jerry Lewis. And I am not an impressionist. And I thought, and I just, it was like, okay, here we, and it was like,
Miss Purdy, I believe you will find that if the relative and Stella,
and when it was all done, he turned to me and said, Holmes, you're a real ham. And I thought, Jerry Lewis is calling me a ham. So there you go.
He would know all about that.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful song in that, which I listened to the other day, While I Still Have the Time.
Yeah, yeah. And that Marvin came to me
song.
and said, we have to write a song about how life is very precious, and we have to hang on to it and savor it and acknowledge it. And I thought to myself at the time, you're talking like someone who's just had a bad visit from the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that this was a very important song for him. And I think that he wrote it as an impassioned attempt to knock some sense into our heads and tell us not to get bogged down on something trivial, because you have no idea how much more time you have. I worked very hard on that lyric. Yeah.
Oh boy.
He wrote a beautiful.
It's a beautiful lyric, a beautiful, beautiful song. You made a series of albums. One was called The Last of the Romantics. You had a record by Engelbert. I had a song on that album too. So
you did? Which one is it?
It was called What You See Is Who I Am. And I wrote it with the great Buddy Kaye.
Oh,
what you see is who I am. Well, nothing less, nothing more. Nice song. 1979. And his album Partners in Crime is released. Well, Partners in Crime had 4 top 10 singles. Is that right? 5?
It depends on which chart you're looking at.
Okay.
Why don't we say it had 11? Let's say it had 11.
It had 11 potential. But a lot of great, and that was
and there were only 10. By the way, there were only 10 songs on the album. So to have 11 hits,
well,
meant actually what it was the end groove, the lock groove.
Yeah. Well, they originally had Timothy on that groove, and that was jettisoned at the end. Now, everybody, this is the album where if you were listening to if you were radio fans at the time, pop radio fans, that's when you maybe first heard of Rupert. I mean, because you had Escape. Now, the Pina Colada Song, people know this. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you've been asked this a million jillion times, but I found an interview with you where you actually explained the recording, what happened, how you got to write that at the last minute. And would you mind just going over that territory again for the viewers? Because I think it's fascinating. And it's a great example, because we have a lot of songwriters looking in. It's a great example of pushing through and persisting through and getting the product and being professional and coming through. So this is about Escape, the Pina Colada Song, please.
Okay. And if you are a struggling songwriter, when I was struggling, and that was a specialty of mine, struggling. I majored in that in college. But I did, there's a quote. It's a homily, and it's corny as hell, and it's always attributed to Calvin Coolidge, but it turns out he didn't say it. But look up, type the word persistence and Calvin Coolidge into Google, and you'll get this quote about how unfulfilled geniuses are a dime a dozen. It's persistence. It's persistence that is the elixir, the magic potion.
Mhm. Yes.
And I've already mentioned to you that I was sort of educated by Paul Vance, that if you had a song like "Bubblegum Has Come to Town," and you suddenly that lyric wasn't going to work anymore, you wrote a new song to fit the existing track.
That night,
Absolutely. So I'm recording my 5th album, and there was a song that had nagged at me, just a little riff. I had looked out the window. I had an office on 5th Avenue, and I looked out the window and saw that every store on the block was an Italian designer store. And I wrote just newly at the piano, I wrote "Fiorucci, baby, in your new Gucci shoes. Poochie, poochie, baby. Gucci G's, Gucci goos." And it kind of stuck with me. The riff was like a backwards version of the Magnificent Seven theme, and kind of a little bit of a reggae feel to it. And it stuck with me, and I evolved it slowly into a song that went, "People need other people. I believe you will find when you're clear." So it went on like that. We go to do a session, and we're recording at Plaza Sound, which is on the 7th floor of Radio City Music Hall. It was an old radio broadcast studio. And I've been recording my album there for a couple of weeks. And the drummer, a brilliant drummer named Leo Damian, said, on this cut that you're doing, this people that you need other people need other people. I could use a second drummer, because that'll free me up to do some extra drum fills. I won't have to be just kind of the metronome for the record. I want to play loose. I said, okay, that's great. So I got another drummer. We will not mention the other drummer's name. And as you know, when you do an album and you're going to do a cut, you'll do one run through of the song, and you're not worried about whether you get it perfect. The main thing you're going to do is, as soon as you've done that take, you're going to go back in the control room and hear how it's sounding in the control room. And someone will say, "Oh, you got to get the toms. The mics have to be closer. I don't know. I'm hearing so much room on the piano. Can we get the mics? Can we blanket it or something? Or that guitar is bleeding into." So we come in to listen to this first run through that we did of this cut. People need other people, and the musicians come in with me so that they can hear. And I listen. I say, "Well, I know we can do better than that." And I look. And the drummer, the second drummer, not Leo Damian, the second drummer has passed out and is clearly not going to be coming to anytime soon. They wake him. He has some friends. They're going to get him into a cab, get him home. I never learned to this day if it was just the thrill of that first take that made him pass out, or if it was some thrill he had on the way to the session that made him pass out. All I know is that's it. This is scrubbed. I am a frugal person. It's not that I'm cheap at all. I'm a good tipper, but I'm running out of time and I'm running out of budget. And I have to have an up-tempo number to balance out the fact that the album is ballad heavy. And I know that they're going to I was counting on this tempo to be a nice kind of medium up-tempo song. It would help balance. There was some up-tempo. There was a lot of slow. I needed something in the middle. And I thought, we've got this cut. And what I did was I found that there were 16 bars of that one take that we did that were tight, that were really tight. Mm. And I did something, David, that was not done then, but is now very commonplace now in the digital era. Jim Boyer, who co-produced with me and is a great engineer. Yeah. He and I duped the 24-track master, 2-inch tape, to another 24-inch machine. He did it over at A&R Studios. And he duplicated those 16 bars over and over and over again on a blank reel of tape. Mm-hmm. Then, meticulously and just must have been a horrible job with a razor blade and tape. He edited together those 16 bars until he had one loop, 4 minutes long, of those 16 bars being played over and over again.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear that the guitar always goes da 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 like that. And it repeats perfectly. So now I've got, and now you'd call it looping. And it would be a rap record. And it would be, but that you do it all digitally. This was done in analog. Wow. Now I have a 4-minute track of these chords, these basic chords. And obviously the song People Need Other People won't fit that. People Need Other People had verses. It had a different key change, it had a modulation that we never got to. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I can write a new song to this existing track, because this is something I had done in my early struggling days in the music business. And so I tried, I had the melody line that I liked. I had this feel that I liked. So I wrote, that's the law of the jungle, da-dum, in the school of the street, dum, da-dum. You get out of the kitchen, da-dum, da. If you can't take the heat, dum, da-dum. If you don't like the way he loves you, da-dum, da. And it sounded a lot like Billy Joel to me. And I thought, that's not what I do. It's not what I do. Everyone needs a victim. Dum, 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 dum. I believe you will find. Dum, 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 dum. If you're cruel to another, dum, dum, if you're cruel to be kind. Oh no, there's already a song called "Cruel to Be Kind." Oh God. I think the only thing that's going to bail you here is a plot, is a storyline. It can't be just "I love you, I don't love you," because repetition is at the forefront of this track I'm working on.
Sure.
Okay, so it better be an interesting story, because musically, it's the most repetitive thing you've ever written in your life by default, not by plan. And I come up with, and now seriously, I'm not making this up. It's the night before I'm booked to do vocals, and I have a full day in the studio booked the next day from 10 to 6 at Plaza Sound. And my guitarist, Dean Balin, is going to be there, and we're going to fill out whatever I put vocally on this track. We are then going to create, between me on synth and Dean on electric guitars, we're going to create any other sound that needs to go around it. That'll be the only sweetening that this cut deserves and has, and it's going to be that afternoon. So I see a copy of The Village Voice. It's 1 a.m. I've got to write the lyric by tomorrow. And I'm singing it at 10 a.m., whether I like it or not. And it's 1 a.m. and I look and I'm trying to think of ideas, and I see The Village Voice sitting on a chair, and it's the front page is down. So I'm seeing the back section, and it's all the personal columns. In those days, people used to take out ads saying, attractive female seeks fun, sports loving, no cigarettes, smoking, that kind of thing. And I thought, the people in those ads always describe themselves so glowingly that you wonder why, in God's name, if they're so wonderful, they ever had to place an ad in the first place. Surely these people are so wonderful that they will just, they'll be like a magnet. People will just, so I thought, okay, so don't be cynical. Maybe they're kind of excited about the idea that they would meet someone and they have no idea who they're going to meet. And maybe it'll be someone, a fantasy they've always lived for. And I write the song, the lyric. Remember, I don't have to write the music. The music's all set because it's that theme. I write the lyric in about an hour and 10 minutes. And the chorus goes, if you like Humphrey Bogart and getting caught in the rain, if you're not into yoga, if you have that. I go to the studio. And this always kind of terrifies me, because something that changed my life in many ways for the better, not in all ways, but in some ways. Decisions that I made some decisions in about 10 seconds that changed the rest of my life. And they were just reflex. I was about to sing this song. And the first thing I did is, the story I had concocted had a trick ending. And I was afraid that it was obvious, that you would see the trick ending coming a mile away. And that would kind of undercut the song. If you, oh yeah, I knew that was going to turn out that. My guitarist, Dean Balin, is in the control room, and an assistant engineer named Eric Block. Jim Boyer is mixing other cuts at another studio. So it's just the three of us. I say to the engineer, I'm going to sing this song, and if I make a mistake, don't stop tape, because I want to sing this song in real time for Dean to listen to, my guitarist, to see if he gets the ending ahead of when I get there. I say to Dean, I really want you to pay attention to this time, listen to the lyric, and I want you to tell me honestly when we're done if you knew what was coming. He said, okay. So now I get on mic, so I'm not going to stop for anything. And as I'm standing there, I suddenly think, if you like Humphrey Bogart, I think, I don't want to say if you like Humphrey Bogart. I've done a lot of movie references on my albums, widescreen certainly. And also this couple is looking for an escape, a fantasy. And Humphrey Bogart is a cinema noir image. He's a black and white image. He's monochrome. This couple in this song, they want it like they're islands. And I think, well, when you go on vacation in the islands, this is happening in the course of about 1 minute in my brain. When you go on vacation in the islands and you go out on the beach the first afternoon, you would never order a Budweiser in a can. You're on vacation. That may be what you like to drink, but that's not going to be what you're going to drink the first day you're out on the beach. You want to officially announce to yourself, to the world, and anyone you're with, I am on a vacation, and I am going to have a drink in a hollowed pineapple, and it is going to have the flags of all nations. It may even be blue. And I thought, so I have to sing If You Like, and it's got to be an escape drink. What are the escape drinks? I thought there's a drink called a Mai Tai, daiquiri. I think there's one called a Pina Colada. I had never had any of those drinks. Never had a Pina Colada in my life. I wasn't even sure if it was Pina or peanut, but I guessed, I thought there was some kind of Sidors involved. So I said, if you like Humphrey Bogart, you will understand, David, instantly. I said, no, I'll have to add an eighth note. If you like Pina Colada, I said, that's actually more mellifluous. If you like Pina Coladas, I said, that's not if you like Humphrey Bogart. It's actually a better sub. I'm going to do that. Okay, roll tape. We roll tape, and the vocal that you hear on that record today is the first time I ever sang the song all the way through.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know.
I had recited I had read the lyric, I typed it to have on the music stand, but I had never actually tried singing it. And because of that, as I'm singing live, I had to do what a jazz singer does. I suddenly said, oh, I've got too many syllables coming up here. I'm gonna have to. So I'm going, I've got to meet you by tomorrow noon, which is not within the meter of the song. And I'm doing all of this like a jazz singer would in real time, or sometimes I had to string it out. Like I'm not much into health food. I am into champagne. I'm gonna have to do these quarter note triplets to fill it out, and all of that is
one take. All one take.
And one take that I thought, this is not a serious take. This is just for the benefit of Dean Balin hearing the song for the first time, so that I could then go in and say, okay, you got to tell me. Did you guess it? Did you guess where the song was going? I go in. I said, did you guess it? He said, no, I never saw it come. I said, good, that's good. I said, look, I turned to the engineer, Eric, and I said, that was just a scratch vocal, which means a reference vocal, don't worry about that. But let's use that as our guide, because Dean and I have got to now kind of create what's going to fill the instrumental break that occurs 3 times in the song. Now, if I hadn't, this is the part that, this only occurred to me about 2 years ago. If I had not said, if you like Pina Coladas, then there would have been no reason on earth for the instrumental break in that record to have a kind of tropical Hawaiian sound. if I had said, if you like Humphrey Bogart, I would have said, we got to get something like a tenor sax, a bluesy tenor sax. But I had said, if you like Pina Coladas, and it was about people getting an escape. And suddenly in my mind, they were on vacation. So I said to Dean, you know what, do a slide like a Hawaiian guitar. Da, 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 da. I said, I'll get a surf sound on this. I had a stupid Korg M1, which was like a poor man's mini Moog. And you could get the sound of surf by sweeping white noise and going, doing that. I had an ARP string ensemble, and I just had to play a high E over the very last chords. I added some flutes with the Korg, so I would get kind of a whole tone flute effect that would be kind of dreamy. And the whole thing had this, and in the middle of the record, 3 times in the middle of the record, the listener gets a little bit of a lush escape, like a Martin Denny record of Tahiti. You go on a little vacation within the record. And I never would have created that instrumental break that way if I had not said Pina Colada. The song is called Escape. I go out now, end of the afternoon, to do the good vocal. This is going to be the good vocal. Now I'm going to watch what I sing. And for the life of me, I can't get the song to sound as energized as I was. It's like the first time you tell a joke to a friend and you're kind of full of your own energy because you're going to share this story with them. No one else is. Yeah. And I thought, you know what? No one's ever going to hear this song anyway. It's going to be side 2, band 4. I'm just doing it to fill out the album. I said, you know what? We're going to just go with the vocal I did. It's okay. And I'll add some harmonies in the chorus. I'll sing a third above myself. And then I'll add a third harmony on the third chorus, like kind of like the Searchers and Needles and Pins. I'll do that. So I did that. Jim Boyd does a mix. The label comes to me and says, what do you think the first single from the album is? I said, obvious, him. Him's a him. Him. They said, you know, our team, our promotion man, they're kind of into this escape song that you did. I said, what? No, I said, that's a throwaway. That's not serious. Him, I worked on him. I said, no, I think we know better. Let us put it. I said, all right, okay. 1 week after the song comes out, they call and they say, we have a terrible problem. I said, what is it? They said, people are liking the song. They're really responding to it. We got in Washington and Philadelphia, that people calling in like crazy, but they're all saying they want to hear the song about the Pina Coladas. They're going to the record store and saying, I want that record about the Pina Coladas. And you call the song Escape.
And the guy at the record store doesn't know.
He doesn't know what
file.
Pina. I don't know.
There's nothing here.
Coladas. No, nothing. P. I looked under P. I looked under T for the. I looked at, They said, can we put in parenthesis after the word escape? Can we do parenthesis, the Pina Colada song, close parenthesis?
Dang.
I said, that's not the song's title. That's like parenthesis. They said, if we don't do this, it's really on its way. I said, okay, do it. And the record vaulted up the charts. I never saw in my own career anything remotely. It gained 20, 25 points a week. The hardest station to get your record played on at that time was WABC AM. And they went on the record when it was 64 on the charts nationally. Usually they don't play a record unless it's top 10.
Because they knew it was going. It was going.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
They wanted to be part of it.
And I'm watching the charts and I'm thinking, I might hit the top 10 by December. And suddenly it's not that I've hit the top 10. It's that I'm number 1 and it's the last number 1 record of 1979 and therefore the last number 1 record of the 70s. And
wow.
And it was astounding. But when I think about the fact that it was a very impulsive decision I made to say, it's not if you like Humphrey Bogart. Right. And making the instrumental break the way it sounded because I had said Pina Colada, and writing the song the night before, writing that lyric because I had no choice but to come up with a lyric, and having a repetitive track, which is probably one of the reasons it was a hit, a repetitive track because a drummer chose to pass out after recording the first take of a song called People Need Other People.
Wow.
It's terrifying to think what your life can hinge on, how many little things.
Well, that's an extraordinary story. And yes, it speaks of persistence. but it also speaks of a little bit of resignation. I don't mean like a apathetic resignation, but a really kind of giving over. Hey man, well, first of all, you're in action. You're in action. And there's no time to be thinking about anything. I guess that's what was good about Jingles.
Yeah.
Jingles. You got 12 minutes, and the guy with the cigar is going, hey. So you're in action, and you're making the right choices because you're not thinking about it, because you know what you know. You just know. Yeah. And that's what I love most about that. It's a testament
sometimes,
to the creative process.
A lot of times in sports, someone will do something miraculous, and you look at a replay of it, and there's no way they could have done it, but they had no time to think, and they just did that. They
just did something extraordinary and could never be done.
Yeah. And if you thought about it, if you prepared for an hour doing it, you wouldn't even be able to with the baseball.
It's so true. So then Him was another hit from that album, and Answering Machine is very good. You have some wonderful songs. In You I Trust. You have a little rhyme in there. Politicians' promises have made all of us doubting Thomases. I like that so much. And wonderful stuff. I'm going to read one of the lyrics from one of the songs from that album, and I particularly love this. And what I love about this, it's called The People That You Never Get to Love. And the reason I wanted to pull this out is this is something that Rupert does. It's always fascinating, but he actually thinks a new thought. You do. You think the thought you think, but it's a new thought, just so happens, and this is a new thought. He's thinking of all these people that we see from day to day, all day long, any one of whom I could have a relationship with, or they could have a relationship with me. Why is it that person and not that person or all of these people? So this is just, it's a thought, and it's beautifully written as in everything he does. It goes like this. You're browsing through a secondhand bookstore, and you see her in nonfiction V through Y. She looks up from World War II, and then you catch her catching her eye. And you quickly turn away your wishful stare, and you take a sudden interest in your shoes. Pretty good. If you only had the courage, but you don't, she turns and leaves, and you both lose. And you think about the people that you never get to love. It's not as if you even have the chance. So many worth a second life, but rarely do you get a second glance until fate cuts in on your dance. Now check this out. And you'll see her on a train that you've just missed, at a bus stop where your bus will never stop, or in a passing Buick when you've been pulled over by a traffic cop. Or you'll share an elevator, just you two, and you'll rise in total silence to your floor. Like the fool you are, you get off, and she leaves your life behind a closing door. And you think about the people that you never get to love, the poem you intended to begin. The saddest words that anyone has ever said are, Lord, what might have been. And no one said you get to win. Still, you're never going to miss what you don't know. And you don't know who you'll meet at 3:30. It could be a total stranger who looks something just exactly much like me. One of the people that you never get to love. One of the people that you never get to love. The people that you never get to love. That's a beautiful, how do you say in your country? It's a fine wine. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Who looks something just exactly much like me. Exactly much like me.
Yes.
It's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, David.
Yes, and thank you for writing so beautifully. I want to talk just a little bit about your theater work, because this is something that New Yorkers know of Rupert Holmes, the pop guy who had a career and can have it any time, doing that, did a whole other thing. And this is something that you need to know about. And you composers and lyricists out there, you need to know, and you'll see why. In 1985, you had, well, it was finished in 1985. When did you start Drood? How early were you in that?
I started to try to write it in 1971. And
oh
I
my
wrote
goodness.
and it wasn't going the way I wanted it to. I wrote a couple of little parts of it, and I set it aside. And then I came back to it in 1983. So I took 3 years out of my life pretty much to write it.
After the records, after the hits, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
you retook it.
I was sorry. No, I was just going to say I was performing. This is at 1983. 3 years after the PINA COLADA song, and I was performing at Rodney Dangerfield's Comedy Club, and I was the first music person to ever headline at this comedy club because I'd worked a lot of comedy into my music. And Joe Papp and his wife Gail Merrifield came to hear me because they knew my albums. And after the show, he said, "You know, what you're doing up there is theater. Have you ever thought about writing a musical?" And I said, "Yes, I actually have, and I know what it is, and I'd like to tell you about it." And he said, "Okay." And he made an appointment, and I explained to him what I wanted to do. And he said, "I'd be very interested." And I thought, how many people in New York City would give their IT to have the attention and ear of Joe Papp, who produced, I don't know, a chorus line and Shakespeare every year, second part. So I started in earnest in 1983 to write it. And I really did nothing else except the occasional gig to pay some bills, but write this musical for 2.5 years.
Oh, okay. Well, everybody, it's called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. It's the unfinished novel by Charles Dickens, and for which Rupert wrote the book, the script, the music, the lyrics, the orchestrations by himself. And he won, as I mentioned before, he won the Tony for Best Book and Best Score, and he won the Drama Desk for all 4 of his participations.
The Tonys did not have a Best Orchestration category that year.
Oh, because he would have won it if he did.
Well, but the orchestration was, in terms of the physical labor, the orchestration was the hardest thing to do. So I was, and of course, Drood won Best Musical too. So I'm very.
Oh, I missed that. So
That's okay.
Won the Tony for Best Musical. It's an extraordinary piece of work, and I saw it in 85 or whenever it first came out. I did.
Oh, that's nice.
And I loved it. And but I re-listened a few days ago, and bathed myself in this experience I was looking at, and I wanted to say something to you before I talk about the specific show. This is something that you do and did here that I've never seen. I've maybe never seen anyone do. I mean, Lin-Manuel Miranda, is a virtuoso in his field, and this is something quite else. It's as large, it's as deep as a Sondheim musical. It's got elements of pop in it, and it's as large and fresh as anything that I've ever seen. And I'm saying this because I wanted to tell you something, and I can see it and tell you this. Okay, this is a unique thing that you do. This genre. Not just, I know you've written beautiful lyrics and we're talking about the successes you've had in the theater. But all of this, taking something and bathing in it, every aspect in it, bringing to bear all of your talents into something like this is utterly unique. No one does this. Nobody. And I guess my point of saying it to you is to put you on the spot in front of others and say, you must do more of this. Don't do Drood 2. Edwin Drood, the mystery is solved. But I want is because your music is splendiferous. It's deep. It's everything that an emotional ride should be. You know how to do it. So that's it. I'm going to shut up now. But you have to know that I really wanted to tell you that.
It's very kind. It's very, very appreciated. And
you're welcome.
Coming from the source. My father always taught me, take a compliment from whence it comes. So your kind words coming from you in particular, and I am such a true fan of your work.
Thank you, Rupert.
So that means a great deal.
Thank you very much. I'm glad. So you get Joe Papp involved in this thing, who's, as you say, is from the public theater and down in the Village, created chorus line. And did he put Hair? Was it Hair?
Yeah, that's very good.
That's his first one.
He was not the ultimate producer of Hair on Broadway, but Hair came out of the New York Shakespeare Festival. It did sort of grow out of that experience. I wasn't even trying to do a joke about hair growing. Sorry.
Okay.
He did a little trim. Go ahead.
He trimmed
We
hair.
got to trim the show. Sorry, that's
terrible.
That's not. I know. It just landed and it was there.
It was a flaxenless, waxenless joke. Okay, so now, but you get Wilfred Leach to direct, or I guess Joe arranged for that, and Graciela Danielle to choreograph, and it just on the heels of Pirates of Penzance, right?
Yeah.
Which blew up in New York.
Yeah,
that was a big deal in New York. Kevin Kline was in it. Linda Ronstadt was in it.
Yeah. I inherited their role. You know what I'm saying? They had already sort of ironed up a kinks on how they were all going to work together, and I got many of the same people on the team, and even some of the people from the cast, some of the ensemble people came into Drood. So I was so lucky.
Oh, wonderful!
Blessed.
And it's great, because Wilfred Leach is famous for breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Fourth wall, everybody, as well. In a theater, you've got two walls, and the back wall, and the front wall is between the performer and the audience. So when you break the fourth wall, you include the audience, you make asides, you go out into the space. So anyway, but there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of wink wink, and which I guess was a lot of Wilfred Leach.
There's Wilfred's in every part of it. And so is Graciela Danielle. And
she's so great.
And the cast was amazing too. I was very lucky. I was incredibly lucky.
Incredible.
To work with. I mean, my first show is working with people who have already they know what they're doing.
Sure. And Betty Buckley was the lead, yeah.
Betty Buckley, Cleo Lane, Howard McGillen, George Rose, who won the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical for Edwin Drood. And just Bob Shaw, who's the same designer for Pirates of Penzance and Edwin Drood. So, how lucky can lucky sod get,
Okay, well, it's but the work is the thing, right? So here we go, everybody. Now there are songs in this thing that are very, and you close your ears, Rupert, you don't want to hear this. This is between me and them, and these guys. Okay. There's some great songs, You're Writing on the Wall, Never the Luck, Settling Up the Score, and Don't Quit While You're Ahead, which is the same melody. See, he uses these modules, these melodic themes, and repeats them with different words and da 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 da. And it's an operatic form that he's using in modern musical. Wonderful work, lyrics, orchestration, music. Everybody, listen to this. You can listen to the revival too, which was 2012, I think. Or 13 or whatever, equally great. It's a smaller band, but whatever. Now, there's a song called Moonfall, and I think that's probably the most recognized song, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Compositionally, it's a masterpiece, right? I'm not the first person to tell you this, right?
It's one of the better things I've heard.
Yes, it's extraordinary.
This song is an interesting song because it's one of those things where the situation, the characters really have an effect, and you know about this well, on what kind of song you're going to write for them. The situation is going to be as much an ingredient. It's not like that every song in a musical. I once said, people said, well, what is the difference between writing for pop radio, top 40, and writing for theater? I said, God. I said, when I write for a top 40 artist, I have to write in the vernacular. I have to write as if it's conversation right now. I can't write I'm wild again, beguiled again, a whimpering, simpering child again in 2021. I said, when I write for musical theater, I write for a universe that is defined by this show and this story and these characters. And I wrote the music and the lyrics that is appropriate to that universe. And it would be strange if it sounded like 2021 when it's really 1895. And people said, is it hard when you had to write period? I said, oh my God, are you kidding me? When I write for educated and Victorian people in 1895, I have access to a vocabulary that I can't use in top 40 radio.
Yeah.
I can't write halfpenny, twopenny, one penny, threepenny, 12 to a shilling, twice that to a florin, and would you not fancy the currency foreign to find the same face on both sides of the coin? Bob is your uncle from pennies to guineas. The two-sided mint is the rule, not exception. I mean, it's just the pot. Another trifling day, one more soul-stifling day of blinding pain. Boredom grinds my brain down to the grain. So I can get away with that because it's 1895, and maybe that's how people talk. With Moonfall, the crazed choir master of an English cathedral, English cathedral city, is about to give a music lesson to his young and beautiful music pupil, Rosa Budd. And his interest in her is not healthy. And she's very frightened of him. And he says, on the occasion of your birthday, I have written you this song. And she looks at the lyrics and she said, oh, this would not be proper. I can't. He says, as your music master, that shall be for me to decide. Sing the song. And so she sings this song, but what she's really singing is the words he wants to put in her mouth, the words he wants to hear her say to him. And so it's in our woke era, this is a primary predator. And the song had to be pristine and impeccable and poised, with not a wasted note in it. And when I wrote the orchestration, I knew it had to look on the page like the neatest chart I had ever written, with absolutely everything aligning perfectly, because she's this lovely, innocent girl about to sing words that are seething with a kind of erotic emotion. And yet it's all just a music lesson. Nothing bad is happening here. I'm just trying to get you to sing better, Rosa. And I knew that had to be, and I didn't write the song for about 3 months because I knew it had to be as perfect a song as I knew how to write, as well constructed a song as I knew how to write, because of all the circumstances framing it. And one day I went to lunch and came back to my office. And I don't believe in stuff like this at all, David, just so you know, but it happened to me. I sat down at the piano and I played virtually the entire song, including the bridge. The bridge does things harmonically that I still am not quite sure. I mean, I know what I did and I can analyze it, but I don't know whatever made me think I could do that. And there are things that, and it was done. And it was done. And obviously what happens is in the 3 months I didn't write it, my brain was working on it every single minute. And I do believe that. I do know that when I say, well, I'll go to bed in the morning, I'll know what I'm supposed to do. And in the morning I wake up and I do know what I'm supposed to do because my brain's worked on it all night. So I do believe in that stuff. But it's been sung at Carnegie Hall and the Royal Albert Hall and
Sure.
and
Miss Streisand recorded it?
Yeah. And Renee Fleming. And it was because the situation, that moment, required something that maybe, I don't know that I really believe this, but I had to write something that outreached myself and my capabilities up until that time. I had to write something that was a work that could stand in, it could be sung in a recital hall. I'm always hearing it at auditions. It's become a standard audition piece. And a lot of times people will come in and audition a soprano using that song to show off their voice, and they don't know I'm the person who wrote it. And it's every now and then you have a chance to reach into yourself a little deeper and do something better than what you really maybe are. You create something that's a better version of you.
Yeah.
And that's what that song is for me.
I love it. I love it. And see, I think that's why I said what I said before about this is your playpen. And when I hear you doing everything, it's oh boy, oh joy, oh boy, oh joy, oh boy.
Yeah,
Oh joy. That's all I hear.
I know. I'm in pig heaven.
Okay. Good. Yeah, good. And so are we. And of course, now you don't mess around with imperfect rhymes with these boys and girls.
No.
You don't do that.
No. I have no excuse to do that.
Right.
I don't have an excuse to do that. These are people. We're writing in 1895. Gilbert and Sullivan are my competitors.
Wait. But still, you wouldn't violate that time-honored tradition. You can't. They'd shoot you. But for good reason. I want to just to say this really quickly. When we talk about the pop stuff, and there are just so many rhymes for self. It's elf, shelf, and that's it, right? Schmelf? No. Elf and shelf. So how many songs have you heard? It's like, myself, and it goes, I'm up on the shelf. It's like, oh God, no. So in pop music, there's something about pop music or rock music that by its nature wants to go against the grain a little bit.
Yes.
And I like when Billy Joel sings self and nobody else.
Yeah.
I like it.
I understand, because it's part in its own way. It's a distillation of the rebelliousness of the rebellious nature of the music.
Yeah,
absolutely. And as John Lennon said, money don't get everything. It's true. What it don't get, I can't use.
I can't use. I think everything is truths. I think the original is truths. But in theater, it's very spoken. It's not unspoken. It's a spoken requisite where you use perfect rhymes. And I have my viewpoint on it. And why would you do that? I don't mean that because you're talking about 1800s. I mean, what is it about having the box to work in, the limitation to work in that spurs something fresher? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a good way to talk about it. If you say to me, do anything you like, I'm doomed. Carte blanche to me is enslavement. I need the limitations. Robert Frost, I think, said something about writing poetry without rhymes is like playing tennis without the net. I used to welcome somebody saying to me, "Can you write a Bacharach and David tune for me?" Now, a lot of people would say, "How about I write a Rupert Holmes tune for you?" Okay, but I used to think, "Okay, that's good. That's good. I'll have the limitation of I'm trying to give them what they want from a Bacharach and David kind of tune. And by the time I'm done with it, there'll be so much of my idiosyncrasy in it that it'll never be anything like a Bacharach and David tune, but that'll hold me in." And I find you need something to fight against. And the limitation of you say, what I love about rhyme schemes is when you get to your second verse, you don't have to wonder what your rhyme scheme is. It's gonna, pal, you're writing a second verse, it better match the rhyme scheme. It doesn't mean the rhymes all match, but the rhyme scheme. I've worked recently with a lyricist who doesn't honor meter or rhymes, rhyme schemes. It's not that he doesn't rhyme, but he'll go da 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 rhyme, da 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 rhyme, da 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 rhyme, da da da. And I'm saying, yeah, well, as long as some composer is willing to ride that bucking bronco and hang in there with you, But yeah, I love, there's nothing thrilling about breaking a rule if you don't know what the rule is.
Oh boy, that's so great. Yes.
Right. So knowing what you're fighting, what you're coming up against. I'm sorry about that little surgeon level I just gave you, but knowing that you're going to do it, and you're going to be very creative, and you're going to do it within a time-honored rhyme scheme, meter form, that goes back hundreds of years, and there's no reason to hang on to it, but you've arbitrarily decided that you're going to honor this principle that worked for people 100 and 200 and 300 years ago, and you're going to stay with it for no good reason other than that it is a limitation and a constraint, and with limitations and constraints come ways that you can say, you see how I kind of got around that? I used to love in music theory, there were all these rules of 4-part chorale writing. And I thought, is there a way I can, and there are rules and you can't break them. You can't do parallel fifths. You can't do parallel fourths. You can't jump an augmented second. And I would say, is there a way that I can still follow the rules and get it to sound like a record by the High-Lows? That can I get a major seventh in there, even though major sevenths weren't allowed unresolved when these rules were made? And so it's the fun of breaking the rules and knowing what they are and finding a way to, so just as in Moonfall, the fact that I had to write this piece as pristine and reserved and
Sure,
that allowed me to fill it with emotion because it was trying to break out of this artificial cell that I had created.
How interesting. How interesting. How interesting. Yeah, I got it. Well, thank you. It's brilliant work, and everyone must hear it and see it when it gets revived again. Then you've written plays, you've written books. We could take another hour and talk about all these things. This is more of a song show, but I
have an ice cream truck route. You haven't touched. You have not touched on my ice cream truck route. I have.
Yeah.
I have a.
And is it a
soft serve?
Not
soft
so
serve.
good humor. Not so good.
So I
humor.
think that's good.
Soft
I like not so
serve.
good humor. It's soft serve. Here's the thing: as to cut costs, I don't let the kids have cones. It's not. They just have to put out their hands, and I. And I do
and you just glom it under their hands.
And that's why it's an ice cream truck, because when I do that, their parents get very angry, and I have to drive off very, very fast because it's not really nice, and their hands aren't.
Mommy, my new
the ice cream
pants.
truck man came again.
He came again.
All right,
but
yes.
but I don't mean to kind of jump over this because I actually saw Thumbs. Because we have a mutual friend, it's Kathy Lee Gifford.
Oh, of course.
Thumbs.
So you saw
she
Kathy
took me
Lee
up.
in that.
She took me up to see Thumbs, which I thought was fantastic. But you have this incredible ability and interest, obviously, in writing thrillers and mysteries.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, I haven't seen Accomplice, but it won awards, and Solitary Confinement was on Broadway and such. And there's one piece that I would love to see, and I haven't seen it, and I have to see it, and that's Say Goodnight, Gracie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-man show. It started with Frank Gorshin, who was
Right.
I'm sure was wonderful. And I saw something on YouTube. Another guy, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, there are a couple of fellows.
They do a good job. But it's a one-man show portraying George Burns, but the point is that Rupert finds a way to tell that story. It's a one-man show, and it's about the life, and it's about George and Gracie, and that's not easy to hold
90 minutes
together.
of just one person talking.
Right.
I thought one of the things that appealed to me greatly about writing a story of the life of George Burns, who lived to be 100, was that I knew that if I could tell his life, I would also be telling the history of American entertainment.
Oh,
because
wow.
he was a part of it from, we're not allowed to talk about the minstrel shows, but from that period through vaudeville, through the earliest days of radio, the earliest silent movie, talkies, television, and then won an Oscar when he was 80 years old as a movie actor. So I thought, except for video games, he was at the center of every major American entertainment form. And I thought that would be uplifting. And also, his life is a great love story about his partner, Gracie Allen, who was who gave him love and gave him the thing he also always wanted, which was a good act. She gave him a good act. He was 30 years old when he met her, and he had nothing but terrible vaudeville acts. He was a performer, and he was tenacious. He hung in there, and finally. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, did you know anyone? Obviously, George had passed when your play was produced, and Gracie was long gone. But did you know anyone who knew them and then saw your play?
Well, their son, their adopted son, Ronnie, saw it, and he said that, and he was on the series now and then. He said, "I'm really happy about this play because everybody knows about my father, but I feel like when they see this play, even though it's a one-man show," he says, "when they leave, I think they're going to know a lot about my mother." And she, even though she's never on stage, she is a presence felt in the show.
Oh my!
And there are a lot of scenes that he does with her, you just don't hear her.
Oh, that's fantastic. So it was the third longest running one-person show in the history of theater. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. They tell me.
Well, okay. Is it coming back to New York, or I'm sure it's playing everywhere?
It plays around. I will tell you an honest truth, which is, and by the way, I don't know what kind of truth there is other than the honest truth.
That's the only kind I know.
The truth of the matter is, and this happens, is I don't know how many people know who George Burns is at this point.
No.
One of the good things about doing the show is that it sort of educates a young audience on what these vaudevillians who became radio people, who became movie people did, and who they were and what they were about. And we use a couple of clips in it, so that's good. But I was doing a musical of Robin and the Seven Hooks, the old Rat Pack movie, and I had a young assistant working with me. And Jerry Lewis decided to drop in on me to rehearsals. This is after I started working on Nutty Professor, and his voice cries out in the theater, "Rupert, where are you?" And I turned to my assistant, who was 20, and I said, "Come on, I'm going to introduce you to Jerry Lewis." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, who is Jerry Lewis?" I said, well, I know. I said, he was part of a comedy team called Martin and Lewis, and this play, the musical that we're doing, Robin and the Seven Hoods, was originally a vehicle for like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Dean Martin was Jerry Lewis's partner. And she said, "I'm sorry, Dean Martin is," and I said, no, then you've never gone to an Italian restaurant if you don't know who Dean Martin is. But yeah, it's a shame because I don't know that it will always be something that's going to bring in droves of people to find out who this man is they haven't heard of.
Well, except for the fact that it's well done, it's well done. I mean, I have a similar thing with Charlie Chaplin, where I, as you say, I do this one-man show that I wrote as a full stage musical originally. But the Performing Arts Center's bookers, or the theater bookers, often say, "I love it, but I don't know how we can sell this to our subscription audience because they don't necessarily know who that is."
Oh God, is that really
how
something
do I put this over?
Is that something someone would say? Really, Chaplin?
Yeah, Chaplin.
Well, then they're going to say, "Well, I don't know about Groucho Marx, but the Marx brothers, are they related?"
Well,
Okay.
But the point being is not to complain, but the point being is like your purpose to keep it there. And my purpose with Charlie Chaplin, our producer, Tony Rockcliffe, accompanies me all over the country and other countries doing this show. And
that's wonderful.
And it makes great impact. But we come across young people who say, "I didn't know who this guy was, but I want to see his movies."
Well, that's good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah. It's a good purpose. All right. And so you've done, so I just want to ask you really quickly about curtains, because you got to work with John Kander. So the situation, everybody, is that John Kander and Fred Ebb, famous for writing Chicago and Cabaret, and as Rupert said, the song New York, New York, which they're quite famous for, and many wonderful musicals. And Mr. Ebb, in the middle of writing, passed away. And the book writer, Peter Stone, who's equally renowned, passed away.
Peter Stone died first. I was not involved in the music at that time.
I see.
They waited about a year, and then they asked me to take a look at what they had and see if I would be willing to come in and And of course, obviously, the idea was it would be a thrill to write with Kander and Ebb.
Sure.
I knew John Kander a little bit. I didn't know Fred. And Peter Stone was one of the great book writers of all time. And by the way, if he only wrote the movie Charade, that alone, which he did.
He did.
But this was not vintage Peter Stone. And apparently they had done 2 readings. The readings had run about 4 hours, and no one knew what was going on. And it seemed to be a send-up of other musicals by other composers. And I basically said, I can do this, but I have to jettison the book. I have to start from scratch. I can keep most of your characters. I have to reinvent some of them. I can keep the idea of a detective who loves musical theater more than he loves solving mysteries and has to solve a mystery at a musical stranded out of town. And in trying to solve the mystery, he tries to also solve the problems of the show as well. And I love that idea. I said, but I also have to make this a period piece. That these characters cannot exist in our contemporary times.
And did it before? Did it?
It was, yeah. It was a contemporary musical. And the people were behaving in a way that we know people don't behave. But if I say this was set in 1959, maybe all those people did behave that way back then. So I moved the setting to 1959, and I had written the first act, and they read it, and Kander and Ebb read it, and they loved it. And Fred was really excited. And he sent me that was a Friday. On Saturday, he sent me a lyric to a section. There was one song they had been trying to work into a musical for years called In the Same Boat. And I said to him, I think I can find a way to get that into this musical. They had never been able to get it into a show. I said, I think I have a way to do it. He said, well, that's so great. And on Monday, the director, Scott Ellis, called me and said that Fred had died. And so we had some wonderful Kander and Ebb tunes that I was fitting into this existing framework and building a framework around, but we no longer had our lyricist. We had our great composer, and the question was, could we even go on? And John Kander, who had written with Fred his entire life, took a little time and then decided that for the good of the show, for Fred's songs they had written together, for the actors that he loved, that he could continue. And he said that one of the things that gave him encouragement was the fact that I was a lyricist, so he would be able to bounce things off me as well. Yeah. It's not like I was only a book writer and therefore he was going to be up a creek without anybody to talk to about the lyrics. He did a brilliant job. I got to write some of the songs that were created after Fred's death. I tried to do the lyrics where I could in the style that Fred loved. He was the kind of fellow who, if he had a word at the end of the second line in the first chorus, when you got to the second chorus a minute and a half later, he'd rhyme that word, even though you'd long ago forgotten that he was truly a stickler for the rules. And if I was changing a lyric that he had written because the reference wouldn't make sense because we had changed the period of the show, I would try to throw in an internal rhyme just to honor Fred, because it would have been something he would have done. So it was an incredible experience. Anytime you work with Scott Ellis as the director, it's wonderful. David Hyde Pierce is the nicest man in the universe.
That's Fraser's little brother.
Niles.
That's how people know him. But I'm so glad you got to do that. And of course that was a very successful thing on Broadway. My friend, we could go on for another 3 hours, and let's. So tell me. All right. Anyway, this is awesome. You've got lots of musicals, I'm sure, in the hopper. Anyone you want to talk about? Or
there are 2 things that I'm working on right now that are particularly exciting. One thing is I have just finished, as will come as no surprise to any of your viewers who reside on Earth. We've had this pandemic, and all theater got shut down for a year. I had a tour of the Mystery of Edwin Drood that was going all over the United Kingdom, and it was going great guns, big first-class tour, and wham, no more. Bang. Luckily, I had, when this happened, from my own career point of view, I had an existing book deal to write another novel. It's time for Simon and Schuster. My first 2 novels were for Random House, or The Truth Lies and Swing. And so I was able, with no distractions from musical theater, to be able to devote the last year to finishing my new novel, which will come out in 2022. And it's called The McMaster's Guide to Homicide. And it is a self-help book for murderers. And
Holmes,
it's one of a
got it again.
series. It's one of a series, and the first volume is called Murder Your Employer. And I believe truly that there will be people who will buy it and leave it on their desk at work just to frighten their boss. So there's that. So there's the McMaster's Guide to Homicide in 2022. And I'm also working with Sir Trevor Nunn on a musical about the life of Andy Warhol. And it's being done under license from the Warhol Foundation. We get to use all his artwork. And we're supposed to be doing a reading of it, if you can believe this, in London in July. And I might have to quarantine to be there. We'll have to see. Right. I might have to stay in a room somewhere for 10 days. Okay. I have a friend who had to quarantine in Australia, and she checked into the hotel and she said, "Oh, you forgot to give me my key." And they said, "No, you won't need it. You're not going anywhere. You're not leaving the room." So,
but I need towels.
Yeah. No,
towels.
we'll leave them outside.
$100 for a towel.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are 2.
Well, that's exciting.
Warhol and the McMaster's Guide to Homicide. I think
that's awesome. And you got the one you did with Melissa Manchester, yes?
Oh, absolutely. Sweet Potato Queens.
She's very proud of that and loved working with you. She told us.
I loved working with her, and
isn't she great?
She and I also wrote something that doesn't often get my first novels, Where the Truth Lies. We wrote a title song for the novel together, which she recorded. And my second novel, Swing, came with a CD of music from the novel. So
that's a great idea.
I do book tours. I got to sing a song for my new book.
That's a great idea. And how do people, do they listen to the songs while they're reading, or does the book say pause, play song? How do you work?
I like that idea. That's like, I don't know if you can remember, but they used to make these kids records where it would say, "Now turn the page." And it was Walt Disney. "Hi, I'm your Walt Disney narrator, and we're going to tell you the story of Peter Pan." Every time you hear the crocodile tick-tock,
turn the page. You're right. Oh, I remember now.
I should have done it that way. No, it's something you read the novel, and then when you're done, you listen to the record, and then you make some popcorn, and then you go to Florida for the summer.
But it's specific to the book.
It is. It's what happened was I wrote the novel was set. Novel Swing is set in the big band era, and its hero is an arranger, because everyone wants to know what the arranger thinks about everything, and in our universe, the detective is an arranger, and the mystery involves some musical clues. When I got done with the book, I made reference to some songs that weren't real songs. I just made up titles and stuff. Random House came to me and said, "You mentioned all these tunes in the book. Could you record a CD of them? And we'll put it inside the back cover."
That's
and
great.
They can listen to it was a pretty interesting idea. Now, if you buy it in paperback or you get it on Kindle, you can download the music for free from my website. So
it's a very good idea. It's a very good idea.
Nice.
All right, my friend, this has been just wonderful. I've enjoyed it so much.
Well, the good news is, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to interview you for the same amount of time. And because listen,
taxi.
Wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Rupert.
And thank you so much, David.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege to do this. I'm glad we could finally sit down together in this virtual way.
Yes.
And there'll be more. More. Okay, please, sir.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
You too. Right
All
back
right.
at you.
So Rupert Holmes, get his books, watch his theater pieces, and review his albums and the quality of the writing. Listen to
and buy my ice cream. Buy my ice cream.
And his ice cream
from my truck. Okay.
Bring your own box. Parting words for our songwriter friends out there. A little something they can use. What would you like to say to them?
The only thing I would say is that songwriting is a wonderful form. First of all, as a writer, potentially you might, when you start writing a song, you might be done in an hour. It's not like writing, I've written novels, I've written screenplays and Broadway shows, but you may write a song that will have just as much impact on somebody's life. And yet it may possibly only take you an hour to write. Sometimes if you write it in a hurry, that may even be good. Or you write it in a hurry and then put it aside and come back to it in a month and figure out if there's some way you can improve it. But it's a wonderful form. And for 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, you are taking someone into a universe that is all yours to manage. And you're going to share something with them or make them see something in themselves that they didn't know was there. It's an incredible effect to have on another human being. And it's a privilege to be a songwriter, because you're basically saying, you sit there, don't say anything for 3 minutes. I'll do the talking. And I think when I'm done, you'll appreciate what I've said. That's a big privilege to take. But it's so inviting, and it's until someone invented the pop song form, which also became the Broadway song form. You had to listen to Homer, tell the story of the Iliad, and you'd have to sit there for like 6 hours. It's like a shadow box, and it can contain the entire universe. So that's why writing songs remains such a privilege and a joy for anyone who tries their hand at it. And you should, if you think you'd like to.
Thank you so much. Well, you exemplify everything you've just said, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, that's Rupert Holmes. Thank you so much. And that wraps up another episode of Song Sessions. Be with us next time, and we'll get to explore the universe of yet another master songwriter. But until then, for all you hardworking artists out there, remember to keep creating beautiful things for us. This world needs you now more than ever. So until then, bye-bye for now. This is David Pomeranz, and we'll see you next time on Song Sessions. Bye-bye.